So as was said, my name is Tarek Loubani, and I'm a refugee. And so it won't surprise you that I want to start with a story that's about refugees. It's another story, since I'm sure you've heard lots of these, but this one's a little bit significant to me because it is my story. When I was first born, I was born as a refugee to parents who were refugees, who had nothing and who were nobody. They had done everything that they could, all of us had, and ultimately they had tried to teach me so many lessons, including what it was that I had and who it was that I would be. This is actually all that I owned when I was first born, all that I had and all that I was. A single piece of paper that said I existed. It's in Arabic, which probably most of you don't read, so I'll translate it for you. It says, the Director General affirms that Tarek Loubani is a Palestinian. And in so affirming, I've given him this identity card, dated and located. That's it. That's all I had. That's all I was. And my family, my father, my mother, and the people around me would remind me of this every once in a while, even though it seemed like to a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, I had everything. And I remember one time, almost by way of intervention, my father sat me down and he said, you know, Tarek, look around here. You see this car, you see this apartment. They can all disappear like that. But he told me another thing. He said, the only thing that they can't take away is what's in here, what you know. In that moment, he would start the foundation in me of how it was that any siege could be broken and what it was that nobody could take away from you. Information, data, knowledge. And indeed, exactly like he said, it came to pass that we did lose everything. This is what they would call the highway of death. We drove through it 3 months before this video was taken, 3 months before basically everything in it was destroyed. My mother had to leave my father behind because he was captured by the Iraqis, and she drove us through this place. And from there we went to Canada, where we would see the ebullience of the first world. It is something that is very hard to describe when you've lived as a refugee, to finally look at all of the wealth of the first world, to actually understand what it is that they have that you don't have, what it is that they have that none of your friends will have. And I realized, as I stared down the first world, that this was something that I would be and I would have that none of my friends would. That is, I knew I would become educated. I knew that I would own things. I knew that I would be free in all of the senses and rich in all of the senses. And that none of my friends who I left behind in those refugee camps would. I didn't know what to do. The first thought when you're in the gold mine is to stuff your pockets, to loot, to take it back home, to give it to the other people who are around you. But that's not the sensibility that was given. The sensibility that we have within this first world is to protect it. That is the kind of integrity that we are taught as good citizens of the first world. This is for you. Don't give any of it away, or else you're going to be poor like them. And just in case it strikes you to take away some of these things that exist in the first world, some of the preciousness of the first world, you're met with every form of violence. How is this suitcase protected? Man with a gun. And we know the guns of the first world. Of course, they are literal. There are literally guns and weaponry. But there are also things like patents, copyrights, laws. These are the things that protect that system today. These are the reasons why you can't take advancements in medicine, advancements in science and knowledge, in education, and just take them to the places that need them most. It's because the patents will forbid you. The reason that all of these systems have been built is because in the end, they look at the world around them, these people in the first world, as though everything is fish. That's how they see it. If you ever wonder why they behave this way, it's because they think of everything like it's fish. And so if everything is fish, that means that if I catch it, you can't have it. And if we take enough of it, then nobody else can. And if they take enough of it, I can't eat. But it's not fish. The world around us is not fish, and data, information, and knowledge especially is not fish. These things cannot be locked up and are not disposed to be removed in these particular ways. And so the thinking is behind. This painting was made about 100 years ago, and it really represents our main position in terms of data freedom. You can make as many copies of it as you want. It is not property. It is not something that is owned. It's not something that can be owned. Let's put some proper terms to this, because these people, they talk in proper terms, they talk in economic terms. Here's the basic matrix of all property as it's seen, or things that are called property. I think many people, Richard Stallman would be foremost among them, completely reject the idea that data or intellectual things can be property, possibly even things. We have two main axes, excludable and non-excludable, rivalrous and non-rivalrous. Excludable means you can keep people away from it, and rivalrous means that when you take it away, somebody else doesn't have it. The fish example is a good one. You can't stop people from fishing. You just can't. You can't patrol all of the oceans. You can't stop a single person and a single boat from doing whatever it is that they want to do with that fish. However, if you take a fish, indeed, there's one less fish for other people. It is indeed rivalrous. Now, the setup right now that we're trying to promote within the first world, we as in the citizens in our governments, is this, one of club goods. That is, that you know that giving this thing to one person doesn't take it away from another person, so you try to create an artificial scarcity so that you can maintain pricing and so on. One example of where this makes sense is a satellite feed. Okay, you want to send out a satellite feed, you only have to send it out once, and then everybody picks it up. However, just because you can pick up a satellite feed doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't, because there's, of course, a great cost to the entire chain of transmission. And so it makes sense. If you're a satellite company, you want to make your money somehow, costs millions and millions of dollars. Sure, you can make a case for it. Cable television, similar case. A few of these other things, similar case. When you put DRM on an MP3, you create another similar case. Our rejection is because we want to push most of these club goods, especially the ones that improve the status of the humanity around us, into the public goods category. We would rather that everything be in the public goods category, so long as it is non-rivalrous. For example, let's say you make an STL, a file through which you can 3D print something. If you give that away to people, nobody loses anything, and in fact, a lot of people gain a lot, including you, because other people will modify your work, improve it, and bring it back. These are probably concepts that you're very familiar with, I'm sure. Nobody in a makerspace isn't really familiar with these. This is more just to put some of these terms to it. So how is it then that people are trying to move these things from what we believe in, something that is not rivalrous, that is, you can't, it doesn't take away from other people when you have it, and not excludable, that is, that you can't keep people away from it? Well, the way you try to keep people away from these things is laws. The United States leads the way, and it does so through two main groups of people. There were two sets of laws passed. This is Adlai Stevenson. He passed one set of laws. He really believed that the United States should deal with one of its problems, with patents, by making it so that they would have these research centers where other people would be able to explore the patents that already existed and figure out a way to commercialize them. On the other hand, these two men, who you might recognize, the one on the right, Bob Dole, the one on the left is Birch Bay, they believed something completely different. They thought what we need to do is more patents, more control, more basically laws. And they passed a set of laws whose purpose it was to basically make it so that universities, the main place that was releasing information freely into the world, would then be incentivized to patent it, to not give it away, to hold on to it, and to try to commercialize it. So, did their plan work? This is the data for all of the patents, basically from the 1960s through to now. Starts in 63, ends in 2014. In blue here, you see 1980, the year that the Bay-Dole Act passed. You can see that it's a relatively flat curve. The number of patents before 1980 is more or less the same, since 1940s really, if this were to go all the way back. And then suddenly, as soon as this act passes, it just skyrocketed. More and more and more patents. This is all patents in the United States, which of course, an unfortunate portion of which is software patents. This is the actual numbers. The numbers really increased. I mean, basically it's a 4.5-fold increase. So, did it accomplish their goal? They wanted commercialization to go up. They wanted people to patent so that they would commercialize. Well, in 1980, the commercialization rate of patents was 5%. With this act and with so many patents, the commercialization rate was, does anyone want to hazard a guess? 5%. So they didn't accomplish more. Yes, sure, the astute among you will realize that in absolute numbers there's more patents, but there's also a lot more garbage. And that garbage is like walls for us. It's like walls for all the people in the world who are trying to do anything. Because it used to be that you could go from an idea to a product, whatever that product was, not necessarily something commercializable, but something useful. And not to romanticize it, but it used to be a relatively straight line. Now, of course, that line is fraught. It's incredibly hard to actually go from idea to thing. For example, when I'm thinking of medical devices, or when I want to do a medical device, almost the first question I have to ask is, what's the patent? Some brilliant students will email me and say, look, I have this idea for this medical device. What do you think? And what do I have to say? Wait a sec, I have to do a patent search. What we're brought into is what's considered to be a natural order. It's like what we're told is that, look, the patents are the way of things. And if you're strong, you're going to survive. If your idea is good enough, it'll make it. If you're bright enough, hardworking enough, then you'll make it. And well, along the way, some things might die. But that's just the way it is. It's the natural order. It's the natural order. So who are you? Are you the wolf or are you the little caribou? That's the question that's put before us, as though you have to be one of those two. Well, I tell you, when I woke up this morning, I did not wake up to follow the natural order. I did not become a doctor to let nature take its course. I did not get into this because I looked around and thought, beautiful, this is great, let's do this. I don't like the decay. I don't like what I see, and I don't like what we have, and neither do you. We don't look around here and think, great, let's be the wolves. Well, if you do, then kind of fuck you, but otherwise. And that brings me back to my father's lesson to me all those many years ago, when he sat me down and said, there's only one thing they can't take away from you. He laid the foundation for how it would be that I would try to break the siege in the Gaza Strip when I finally was able. Because these sieges can stop certain things from coming, and they can't stop others. And the one thing right now that is open for transport anywhere in the world is data, is information. So long as we take the initiative to move it around ourselves. Sometimes we have to do that in ways that are legal, sometimes in ways that are not quite so legal. But the information moves and nobody can stop it. Nobody can stop it. I actually spent a little bit of time in jail, and when I was there, people used to smuggle a lot of things. And of all of the things that people would smuggle, they would always be the most creative with micro SD cards, which was how people would communicate mostly with the outside world. And I tell you, those guards would go crazy trying to find those micro SD cards. Crazy. They could never find them. They could never find them. If you anticipate you might be in jail, talk to me. I'll tell you where to hide them. But it's pretty easy. That's because information can't be controlled. It just can't. You can try. They try very hard. So I looked around at the examples of others. What is it that other people have done to try to beat these particular limits? And what I found was shoes that were decorated and up on Pinterest. Plans for how to make something as simple as a shoe that was a little bit modified. This is a dildo on a drill. I don't know why you would do that, but somebody did. This is a computer that's basically submerged in mineral oil that somebody had taken all of the instructions for and put onto Instructables. And these are all old projects. As the world around us advanced, these projects advanced. This is a CT scanner that some guy made in his garage. He's a valve engineer, so he's a very smart guy. But when we look back, look at the evolution of just this one project, RASP-IO, as you can see there in the bottom right-hand corner. When it first started, look, and we're not talking about very much time. We're talking about a year. Which of those pieces looks to you like it's most developed, and how much development does it look like it has? It's incredible, and it happens through collaboration, through these acts of communalism that we had been talking about. What we realized in Palestine is that all of this helps us gain sovereignty. And so finally we started looking at how we could turn all of that information into our things. And that's where we looked at this project, the RepRap project. Of course, once you get one in, then that's it. You can make as many as you want. And you all sort of know the evolution. This particular RepRap is printing a vase. It's one of the i3s. This is what we have in Gaza right now, is i3s. This is another project which we're using within some of the medical labs. This is actually the most effective, precise peristaltic pump you can get. And it was released by the group as open access. Of course, the parts are 3D printed. Motors are salvaged from old photocopiers. No problem. So during the war, we realized, the wars, I guess, I attended 2 of them, we realized that we really had to turn this technology into medical devices. And in one example of taking from the first world and trying to feed the third world, what we did is we started developing these medical devices in a hospital in Canada. I use them on my Canadian patients, so do my colleagues in Canada. This is a first world medical device that's verified and validated there. This stethoscope, you can see a photo of it right here. This is the actual stethoscope in the photo. And basically, it was all made in Gaza, every single part of it. The silicone, I'm guessing, was not made in Gaza, but easily obtainable almost anywhere. Before this, stethoscopes cost about a month's wage. Would you pay a month's wage for a stethoscope if you were a doctor in one of these places? Or would you make do? Of course, people made do. Even those who do have the money can't get the equipment, because even though the Israelis claim that it's not under embargo, or it's not part of the siege, of course it is. The stethoscope is a sample. It's just the first thing that we made so that we could prove the concept and get going. Next comes a pulse oximeter. The pulse oximeter currently is being developed by a maker lab in Ottawa, one of the cities in Canada, and the University of Ottawa's engineering department, who are doing an amazing job trying to figure out how best to do this. They're coming up with some new things. Of course, we're running into a few of the same legal problems that we all run into, which is when you do something new, you have to worry about getting sued. And so the odds are that we're going to take old technology technology whose patents expired 10, 20, 30 years ago, and implement that. But that's useful too. The stethoscope's last meaningful patent expired 50 years ago. It's a 100-year-old technology, and it still makes a world of difference. These are some surgical tools. In the Gaza Strip, our metal rusts because all of the water is salty, because all of our water treatment plants get bombed regularly, every war. You can guarantee it. Sewage gone, power gone, water gone. And so we've started working with plastic tools that can be heat treated, that don't really need much else. This is one of our big current projects, prosthetics. Any of you who know about prosthetics will recognize this particular prosthetic, even from the backside, as being from the Enable project. This girl lost her hand to unexploded ordnance, UXO, a little bomblet that had been left behind after one of the wars while she was playing in the field. They look beautiful, and she thought it was a toy. She picked it up, and she lost her hand. To give her this prosthetic might change the way in which she lives the rest of her life. She's, I think, 9 or 10 years old. It's a prosthetic that not only is expensive, it's not that it's too expensive, it's just not available. It's just not available. I didn't take this prosthetic in with me. We didn't import it or ship it. We downloaded it. That's it. And that's all you need to do with these things. So when we work for these commons, when we work towards our sovereignty, what we think of very often is that the commons is a thing we had once and then we lost. An example is to think of it like organic food. Well, we all used to eat organic, and then we developed all of these chemicals, and now we live in this unnatural way, and let's go back to nature. I don't believe that this is true, and I don't see this in software or in open access or in anything else. I don't think this is the right model. I think this is the right model. I think the commons comes after everything else. It comes after that period of nothing, and it comes after that period of patents, comes after those copyrights. In essence, the commons is a resistance movement to patents. It is not the thing that the patents came to try to take away, because really, I've looked closely at the history. It's not like there was a commons before. The lack of communications didn't really allow it. And so truly, the more that we are besieged, the more we have a need for these resistance movements. Now, I want to come back to that idea that we basically have, or we are, fish. We're not fish, of course. These motherfuckers want us to think not only that it's all fish, but that we are those small fish. And one of the important things for us to do is to recognize that as things progress, as we move on, and as we are able to resist these systems, really, we will refuse that natural order, and we will insist once and for all that the data will be free like we will be free. Thank you.